Power. Use it or be used by it. Really it comes down to the aspect that power exists out there. People use it on a regular basis, sometimes in a cruel way, sometimes actually in a positive way, sometimes to create change, sometimes it keeps things the status quo. It's got a lot of different uses, but really the purpose of this section over here is to give you an idea of how it's used in the corporate setting. By you can use it by yourself, or how people use it on you or with you in conjunction to achieve your goals as you go through. Years ago, there was a study created by two scholars, French and Raven, 1957, and they came up with 5 bases of power. Later on, they added a 6th base of power they call information, but I want to focus in on those 5 bases because those are still in use on a regular basis, but I guess they've always been in use. All they did was they quantified it, they gathered data, and they put it together in a pretty complex book, and they published it, and it really has been the standard that we go by for many, many years in the aspect of how you actually describe power as you go through. They describe 5 different bases of it. Coercive power, or getting people to comply by you'll do it or else. Reward power, rewarding people to do something. Legitimate power, occupying it. Referent power, in other words, getting people to follow you because of the fact of your charisma as you go through, or the expert power as you go through because you know the material really well. Let's first of all talk about coercive power, the use of threat of force to gain compliance. Do what I say. It could be physical, social, emotional, political, or economic means. All of them are used sometimes in the combination of 1 or 2, or even all of them. In other words, whatever it takes to sit down to get you to comply no matter what happens. A lot of times it's ruling by fear, in other words. And make no bones about it, the aspect of fear is actually more powerful than the aspect of love or trust. It seems like it shouldn't be because of human nature, you think we respond better. But you may love your boss or anything else, but somebody fires your boss. And the first thing you're about to do is go out and, well, that could be next over here. So you don't stand up for the boss that was fired, even if it was righteous or unrighteous as you go through, because you're worried about your future as you go through. Oh, I might lose my job in the process. So really that whole aspect of gaining compliance, it really is a powerful tool. But the only problem with it, there's a couple ones. Number one, the use of compliance or the threat of using compliance or fear actually diminishes its actual power overall. If you have a group of 12 employees, you keep it up, I'm gonna fire you. Okay, the aspect of being fired is terrifying. But then when somebody finally gets fired, everybody watches and that person leaves. And surprisingly, that person actually is still alive after it's all done. As a matter, sometimes they actually thrive by leaving. They find a better job. They find a boss that's nicer to work with. They may get more money in the process, or maybe they don't. Maybe they go out and they have a different life other than the life they had, but they're outside of that, the control and that fear and that domination as you go through. The use of coercion actually diminishes the actual fear of using it in the process. This kind of little aspect as to how it works. The other one really comes down to if you're constantly making certain you don't trust people to do the right thing, you go through the influence is dependent on how you relate to the change desired by the influencers you go through. The person, they watch the agent to make certain that they have to remain, that power has to be in effect. But what that also means is you start stifling the person's creativity and they want to stay only within the bounds that is set there by the person that's in charge as you go through. They're afraid to step out because of the fact of the potential punishment that may happen and that fear that's there. You stifle creativity. So if you want to use fear, it is effective in a lot of ways, except for the fact that if you want a creative organization, this process will never work in that setting as you go through. Reward power. Example, a salary increase, a bonus, yes, a promotion, a treat, yes, recommendations in the process as you go through. You're always watching what can be. Oh, I want that reward as you go through. And it could be almost anything, tangible, social, emotional, spiritual as you go through. All these are really positive things for the person because they're doing, if I do this, I'll get this wonderful thing over here. And sometimes it's how you paint the wonderful thing as you go through. So really, this is a really powerful thing. One of the difficulties you face with is once you give the reward to the person, do you give the reward a next time when they do exactly what you want? Do you give it again? And then what about the person that's over here watching all this? You have to reward them as well. Once you open the door for a reward, you open the door for maybe everybody, or open the door again and again as you go through. Sometimes you sit in the chair. You have the legitimate power. I have been elected here, appointed by everybody else, and so I am in charge. And you're really underpinned by the aspect of social norms as you go through. And this regards, you really want to sit down and you occupy the throne or the chair as you go through. And therefore, all the other forms of power, the other four types, you have a right to use coercion. You have the right to use reward. You have all the other ones underneath the control because you occupy the chair that actually is the throne of power, so to speak, because you are in that legitimate, the elected, the selected, or the appointed position of authority as it goes through. So that being said, you have the right to use all the rest of these. A very huge sense of power is the referent power. It's about all the affiliations that people just want to do things to please you because of the fact of your personality, because you're the leader of this philosophical base as you go through. A lot of similarity. People just enjoy being around you as you go through. A lot of times the agent of change are motivated by a need for affiliation, this reference, because you want people to follow them of their own will without having to resort to coercion. Although if you hold that legitimate chair, you can use coercion, you can use reward, you can even use the referent power. Come on, follow me, and not even let anybody know that you are using the other sources. Just make certain they're all following you in a happy way as you go through. They ingratiate themselves. They want to have a sense of community as you go through. And of all of them, expert power, surprisingly, is a very huge sense of power because of the fact that people go to you or to whoever has that expert power because you're the expert in that field as you go through. You have the credentials, you have the doctorate, you have the lawyer background in the process, you have this expertise, you have this one, and people come to you because you're an expert in that field as you go through. Sometimes I've seen it before where somebody occupying a mid-level chair and everything else, people go to that person and go around the formal position. They talk to that person who has the experience in the area and knows all the ins and outs, or they're wired through the grapevine and the informal process rather than the formal process as you go through. Expert power often is one of those most powerful sense of power because of the fact that people go to them on their own volition and they listen and they sometimes do exactly what the expert says in lieu of the boss as they go through the process. So really, by the time you're all done on the expert power, we go to these people like the doctors and the lawyers and so on. The expertise doesn't need to be genuine, long as the person is perceived to be the expert in that power base as they go through. So when it comes down to power, the ideal situation for any leader is to be able to use all five bases of power. The coercion, having the ability to terminate or bring fear if they choose to use that form of power, or reward people as they go through, but having that chair, that legitimate power as they go through, but above all things, if they have that chair of power, that legitimate power, and people really like what they hear, they have that referent power, and they're an expert in the field, those three can now dominate every other aspect, that people can sit down and enjoy that leadership style because they choose to enjoy it because they're a referent power, and they also know the material inside and out, and people willingly follow them. And if they follow them, then the leader can toss out a reward here and there, and people sit down and they think it's wonderful. And if they don't, they can always use that coercive power to bring them in line as you go through. The ideal situation, a leader is very comfortable occupying that legitimate power role as they go through, but all five of them play a different role. And sometimes you deal with this person over here who really isn't too interested in working. You may have to sit down and use some coercive power to help them. And then the other person who is totally self-motivated, you just sit down and let them go on their own and occasionally reward them as they go through. Sometimes they like to have a public reward or an extrinsic reward or some type of intrinsic, just the work itself as they go through. So leader, they understand the 5 bases of powers they go through. But at the end of the day, leadership, it's a wonderful term. Everybody gets excited about it. There's hundreds, well, maybe probably thousands of books about leadership and everything else. Sometimes it's a mystical term full of hopes and dreams. People fight covertly and openly to be called leader. But in the end, a leader is people that follow. Take care.